for this stuff. But it's going to be important for Joe Biden, the candidate and the president. We've talked about the candidate side. This will be the biggest crowd he gets until the convention. An important opportunity to talk to the American people when you're running for re-election. But there's, of course, a lot more to it in terms of policy, and we want to get a sense of what's going to end up in this big speech with the help of Nathan Dean, of course, senior policy analyst here in Washington at Bloomberg Intelligence. It's good to see you, Nathan. You predicted, by the way, we're going to have a segment at some point called Called It. Nathan called it on credit card fees. Maybe that wasn't a huge leap to know that it would be in there somehow, but we're actually getting specifics on what he's going to say. What do you know?
Yeah, so this morning, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau released its long-awaited final rule on credit card late fees. Now, what this does is it takes the current credit card late fee around $32 and it drops it down to $8. Now, this is only applicable to credit card issuers that have more than 1 million open accounts, which is most of them. But in terms of fees, it's going to take around, in 2022, there was about $14 billion in such fees. This is going to make around 10.5 disappear almost overnight. So now there could be court challenges to this, but this is indicative of what President Biden is thinking in terms of his State of the Union address. If you go back 3 years ago, he created something called the White House Competition Council.
Yes, right.
Don't be surprised if you see a lot of talk about how I'm lowering fees on credit cards, transportation, agriculture. The Department of Agriculture did something very similar this week. Even Ticketmaster. I doubt Taylor Swift's going to get a mention, but this is some of the things that he's trying to mention in terms of bringing these costs down for consumers. But as we're telling our clients, a lot of what he's going to mention tonight is things that happened in the past or he's already mentioned. Mm-hmm. New initiatives may be a little bit harder to come by.
Maybe he could have Pearl Jam in the First Lady's box, do the Ticketmaster thing, have the band stand up, young up the demographic. You're making this work already, Nathan.
I tried.
Absolutely. Now, what's this $8 fee, the $8 limit thing? Is it a monthly cap? How does that work?
No, so it is a monthly cap. So the way it works right now is that it's a safe harbor. Essentially, it states, funny enough, the law doesn't allow you to say that, you can limit it by this dollar amount.
Yep.
But what the CFPB is doing here is they're offering a safe harbor, meaning that you can lower this cap to around $8. And the caps, the current caps vary. We say it's $32 on average, but some of the big banks out there are around $27. Some are as low as $10. So it really depends on what the current aspect is. So, but it goes down to $8. The other thing to note is that this is just one of many initiatives the CFPB is pursuing at the moment, all in the while that they're waiting to hear from the Supreme Court on the constitutionality of their funding. And if the Supreme Court comes back and says, look, CFPB funding isn't constitutional, there could be some concerns with this rule. So this isn't a done deal. We still think that there's more litigation on this to come.
What are they doing about airline fees? Everybody wants to know about airfares.
There's a lot of, the Department of Transportation's been looking at this, a lot of...
They can't touch it, though, can they?
No, but a lot of what the work is being done is on disclosures. So think about going to the movies. Remember back when they used to go to the movies, and next thing you know, you'd be sitting there for 30 minutes worth of previews, and you're like, wait a minute, my 1 o'clock start time...
I forgot what movie I came to see.
Yeah, exactly. So in terms of what the Biden administration is doing, a lot of it is obviously lowering these fees, but a lot of it's also in disclosures. And the idea here is the more information that you give the consumer, the more information that they'll take into account, and maybe they won't go to the movie at 1 o'clock if they're going to be sitting there till 1:30.
Yes.
So, so a lot of it really comes down to the actions that have financial impact, but there are actions in here that also have consumer impact. Underlying always impacts the company.
Did you see Dune already? Tell me you saw Dune 2.
I haven't seen Dune 1.
You haven't seen the new... Oh, man.
I haven't seen Dune 1.
I thought you were going to tell me it was great, and then I really would have been excited to go. Drug prices, insulin. He says that every time he gets near a microphone. That's all part of this package, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so it's not part of the junk fee package, but
the lowering fees.
Yes, but it is part of the Competition Council. And so the drug pricing aspect is, my colleague Dwayne Wright put out a note on this earlier this week. This is something that he's going to try and I think not only tout the efforts that he's done, but also this is one of the words where I think that there's going to be new initiatives as well. For example, just yesterday, there was an op-ed from the former NEC chairman talking about Ozempic, the weight loss drug, and how the impact on taxpayers could be even $1 trillion at a certain point.
Isn't that something?
And so, I just think that drug prices is something that resonates with voters, because if you go to CVS or Walgreens, when you sign up and, you're paying your copay or something like that, it's expensive. So, he's trying to tout all this stuff to combat the I don't want to call it the reputation of Biden economics,
Yeah.
but the idea that Bidenomics actually does lower inflation and does
This is going to
lower
be
fees.
more than a paragraph in the speech. This sounds like a good 10-minute chunk on lowering fees, maybe more than that, coupled with raising taxes on the wealthy. And it's going to come a day after Nathan Dean. Jay Powell is up on the Hill, although he's doing both days, right? This is
Yep.
Humphrey Hawkins. That's interesting. These are some of the same lawmakers who will be sitting in the hall who will be hitting him with questions and listening him to talk about the war on inflation. How does that impact the conversation?
So there's two things that you have when you have Jerome Powell go onto the Hill. The first is the monetary policy conversation. But, because the House Financial Services Committee has 50 plus lawmakers and they all get 5 minutes, there's only so many monetary policy questions you can ask.
Fair enough.
So there's also going to be the regulatory question. And for us, it really comes down to this proposal known as the Basel III Endgame. This is the proposal that would raise capital requirements for the banks up to about 20% for the big ones, 5 to 6% for the regional banks. But the question here is everybody in Washington has this consensus that the Fed is going to have to drastically scale back or substantially change this rule. But people want to know, are they going to repropose it or not? And so they're going to be looking for Jerome Powell to give us any indication. And look, he's a master at testifying and not
Yeah,
providing
right.
any
So
information
he's not
whatsoever.
going to.
So don't be surprised if he just says, we're working in it, we're taking considerations, we're going to try and find consensus, and everybody in Washington is going to try and figure out what he actually means by that. But maybe we'll get lucky and he'll just say that, we're not going to. There's also rumors going around that the Fed could be looking at liquidity standards, that there's a new proposal on that. There's a new proposal on the discount window. Any information that he gives us on that will be extremely helpful. And for purposes of watching it, I'll have my Bloomberg popcorn for the House Financial Services Committee
Yes.
because you get a lot more questions. When it comes to the Senate Banking Committee, there's a little bit more fatigue, a lot less people asking questions.
Interesting.
So that House is the one that I'm going to
Less
particularly pay
grandstanding.
for.
Yeah, that's where the commercials are recorded, of course, right? So it sounds like we're going to make more news on regulation than interest rates or any sense of, what might happen in the next couple of meetings here.
Well, just remember, I'm a regulations person,
Sure.
so I always have that bias. And my monetary policy colleagues always get angry when I say, oh, look, here's the monetary policy hearing, and we're talking about financial regulation again.
Yeah.
But, I think, listening to what our chief rate strategist is saying and so forth, there are going to be significant discussions here about what the future of the rate strategy is for the Fed. Because, look, it doesn't get any more important than that in an election year for the president. And I guarantee you the folks at the White House are going to be watching this for any indication on what Jerome Powell is thinking on that as well.
Well, so then the message from the president is, you need to know I've brought down inflation this much, but the job is not yet complete, right? We're not doing victory laps.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think if you were to pluck out voters from Arizona, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, all these blue states, purple states that are going to be key to Biden's victory this year and say, how are you feeling on inflation? They may be different than what people are saying versus what the numbers are thinking. And so for the president, it's really going to be to try and hammer that message because as you pointed out, this is probably the last time he's going to be able to address the nation on this until the convention.
That's correct. Boy, I'll tell you what. So breaking news there with Nathan Dean, Pearl Jam in the First Lady's box for the State of the Union. Who would have thought he would bring that kind of news in with us today? I kid, of course. It's always good.